This part of the class is going to talk about how to fund the organization and how to operate the organization and the infrastructure that you have to have in order to go for your big grants. So, what are your takeaways from the class tonight related to grants? Well, you should be able to describe the different types of grants. You should be able to describe the different types of grantors. You should be able to identify research tools available to find the money. You should be able to describe the fundamentals of writing the grant, the proposal process, a concept paper, a letter of intent, and you should learn some new words as part of your vocabulary as a result of attending this part of the class. Grants. There are primarily different types of grants. These are your major different types of grants. One is what's known as an unrestricted grant. Unrestricted grants may be used to fund the general purpose of your organization. At least a foreign food, most people, when they give you money, they want it to be used for a specific purpose, especially when you're going after government and foundation money. What's an example of an unrestricted grant, though? Let's say a friend of yours say, I like really what you're doing. Here's $1,000 donation due with what your organization did. That's an unrestricted. A restricted grant is when someone stipulates, here's $1,000 and I want you to use it towards your youth program. So restricted grants, programs or projects that specify a particular purpose and a specific outcome. And we'll talk about outcomes a little bit later in the presentation. So that's what a program. For example, if you decide to do an art program and you want money to do an art program, and that money you want is from ages 14 to 25, for example. And these are the different things you want to teach this person. And you get the grant, and that's specific to that. However, during the operation of your program, you decide that, you know what? I'm going to let some kids that's 5 to 13 into the program, and I'm going to let some people in that's above the number that I specify in that grant. That's a no-no. So you have to be specific. You have to do specifically what the grant calls you for, specifically for the target population. Anybody, any questions related to that? Okay, good. Then the next type of funding is what's known as seed money. Seed money is when you got a new project that you want to get started, or a pilot or demonstration program. Seed money is also when you're trying to go for a grant to start your organization. For example, for the CEO position. Seed money can be used for that or to build capacity as well. The other type of grant is what's known as a capital grant. And a capital grant is when you're trying to get something like a piece of property or a building or a large major equipment that you want to buy. So this was known as capital grants, when you want to build something. When you want to buy a piece of land, those are known as capital grants. A lot of nonprofits might go through for all three types, a program, seed money, and a capital grant at the same time. Then you have what's known as endowments, and I only use this in order to complete the list of the different types of grants. An endowment are grants to provide an organization future security, like a person gives money to a university or something like that. That's what we call an endowment. Normally, nonprofits do not debt endowments. So, and then the other type of funding is what we call a challenge or matching grant. Let's say you write to an organization to get a grant for $300,000, and they say we'll give you $250,000, but you have to come up with the other amount from another source, which is not hard once you've been able to get that amount. And then the final amount, the type of grant, is what we call in-kind support or pro bono. That's from somebody that's going to volunteer for your organization. That's considered a type of money, but it's called pro bono, in-kind support. You don't want to go for every grant simply because it's a grant. There's several reasons why you don't want to go for each grant. But let's talk about the different sources of grant. There's an individual grant. One of the disadvantages of an individual type of grant is that it's really risky for an inexperienced. That is, they look at your experience, individuals. The other type of funding is from community, family, and community foundation. One of the disadvantages of this is that most money is embarked for special funding. We talked earlier about a specific type of program. Then you have what's known as corporate foundations that give money. And they give large sums of money, but it's not likely that they will fund it year after year after year. A corporate foundation will be like Walmart. A corporate foundation will be like Walgreens, Pepsi. All these are what we call corporate foundation. Remember, a corporate foundation by law, in order to maintain that corporate foundation status, they must provide at least 10% of their net proceeds to nonprofits, 501c3. Then you have what's known as a federated, and then you have what's known as government grants. The disadvantage of a government grant is that it tends to be lengthy. The disadvantages of a federated funds, like the United Way, is because it's very lengthy. And the disadvantage of a corporate foundation, again, is because they do not fund year after year after year. Now, there are several sources that you can use in order to go for the final where is the funding. And I want to just simply hone in on two types. One is the Foundation Center, and the other is grants.gov. The Foundation Center is a clearinghouse for grants. They have anywhere from 50,000 to 150,000. I mean, anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 foundations and corporations that give money. What's important about this is that if you try to access this information online, you wouldn't be able to go there because most funders do not have that information online. But the Foundation Center does, as well as grants.gov. Grant.gov is when you're trying to go for federal grants. Now, there are 4 key steps to consider when you're going for a grant in order to increase your chances. First, make sure you read the guidelines. Second, make sure you talk to someone that was a past grantee, or someone that was a past reviewer of a grant, or you want to also reach out to the contact program officer or the contact person. Again, you can get all that information when you go to the Foundation Center. So if you was going for a Bank of America grant and you found them through the Foundation Center, you can find out last year who was the grantee, the person that did the interview, and who was the program officer, and run that information through those people. The first part of starting a grant was you identify your goals, your objective, your vision, and your mission. Is to identify what is the problem. By identifying what the problem is, you want to specify what is the condition that you want to change. For example, if there are students who don't have the wherewithal in order to price their art materials, and as a result of that, they're being duped. They're getting unvalued. So that will be the problem that you want to solve. Or if you're saying that teenage pregnancy is a problem, or if you're saying that gun violence is the problem, you need to identify what the condition is that you want to change. And you want to be able to articulate that position by being able to identify what is it that you're trying to solve? Why is you trying to solve it? Who says it's a problem? Who has the evidence to show that the problem can be solved? Where's the problem taking place? What would happen if nothing takes place with the problem? Now, in order to identify the data necessary to support what the problem is, there are two forms of research: quantitative research as well as qualitative research. Quantitative research is when you begin to address the issue of how many. Quantitative research deals with the how and the why something is going on. Qualitative research deals with focus on the subjective, what the person thinks. In other words, quantitative research is collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data by observing what the person say and what the person do. One way of doing qualitative is through focus group, through interviews, through surveys. On the other hand, quantitative research refers to the count and the measurement of things. And it also goes to the why something is going on. There are different ways that you can gather that information, either through fact finders, which is the Census Bureau. If you're doing something related to health, Florida chart, or if you're doing data related to a city, a county, a state, city.com. This is 3 or maybe 60 different ways of searching for information in order to get that quantitative and qualitative research. Okay, now you know what the problem is. The next stage now is to put together the program design and the program approach. What's the terms used interchangeably? Some people call it the work plan. What does it consist of? Well, first, it consists of your goal. And the goal is a broad statement of what you wish to accomplish. In the case of the parent that wants to do teenage pregnancy, her goal would be to reduce the number of teen pregnancies. That's the what she wants to do. In order to reach her goal, she has to put together a strategy. A strategy is a plan of action, a method, or a process on how you plan to bring about the goal. If her goal is to reduce teenage pregnancy, her strategy might be to connect with early schools, to connect with churches, to connect with youth groups, to connect with that particular demographic in terms of getting their attention on how to solve that particular problem. So your strategy is, how do you plan to do it? You can't do it on your own. Once you identify your strategy, your next element is your objective. Your objective specifies the outcome of your project or the end product. For example, if your goal is to reduce teenage pregnancy, then your objective is going to talk about how you plan to do it. For example, it's going to say our objective is to provide teenage pregnancy workshop to 30 teenagers in Israel County for 6 weeks with an expected outcome that would change their behavior. So what does that mean? Your objective should be specific, immediate, practical, logical, and you should be able to evaluate it. And there are different types of objectives. For example, behavioral objective. If you want to change that person for like teenage pregnancy, we talked about that. So that would be a behavioral objective to change that person's objective. You can do a performance objective. Let's say, for example, if you're doing an educational program, you can look at the performance of that particular person. Or you can do a process objective. That's the manner in which something occurs within itself. For example, if you want to teach a person how to be able to get the best price possible for that art, it's going to be a process objective. Well, you have to do this, and then you do that, and then you do that, in order for that person to be able to understand how to get the best deal for that particular piece of art. Or you can do a product objective. Let's look at some different examples of goals, strategies, and objectives. Here's a program objective. A program goal to support at least 600 dropouts from Minnesota high school to obtain a diploma or a high school diploma, high school equivalency level of certification. Notice that goal is specific as to how many, what they want to do, and where they want to do it. Let's look at a program strategy. That strategy, how do we, excuse me, what is that plan of action? Well, that strategy is to conduct high school equivalency training program for dropouts. That's that strategy for people that are dropped out in Minnesota. Objective. Well, their objective is, because objective, remember, it has to be smart, it has to be specific. Their objective is by December the 20th, 2010, to increase the baseline to 65% of hypertension patients at a community health center. Well, this is a health entity that's trying to reduce high blood pressure, but they're telling you not only when they're going to do it, they can tell you by what percent and what they're going to do. Any questions before we move forward? Everybody good with goals, strategies, and objectives? Excellent. And now we begin really to write the program proposal of the program design. What's important about the program section is that it describes your program activities in detail, indicating how your objectives will be accomplished. It should include some of the following. For example, a description of your personnel, job qualification and job description, facilities, equipment you're going to need, materials that you're going to need. You should talk about how's the program going to be administered. How will the coordinator, how will the program be coordinated, and what is your scope of activity or scope of services? And this should be done in a chronological way, from day one to the end of your program. For example, your first 30 days, you're going to say, we're going to bring on staff. We're going to do outreach to get people learn about the program. I think we're going to put together applications and forms. We're going to buy equipment. We're going to rent out the building. All that stuff should be part of your methods section. Because after your first 30 to 45 days, then you say we're going to actually open up the door now. We did the equipment, we got all the materials, job description, employees, etc. Introduction. Well, your introduction is that statement that gives credibility about your organization, and it describes the professional qualification that you bring to the table. This is where you can use anything you've done in life, your life skills, to show that you can definitely run and do what you say you need to do. Or you can definitely lease it out to get somebody to do it for you. Because your job is original as you bring together what you wanted to get done. And then we come to that section called the conclusion. Now, the conclusion, this is a good place to call attention to the preacher after the grant is completed. This is when you could talk about what you plan to do to make sure that once this grant runs out, how you plan to prepare additional funding sources after this grant runs out in order to continue the process. Or what you're going to do with this grant to position yourself in order to create what's known as earned income. And we're going to talk about earned income later on in the presentation. Also, it's doing this particular part of the proposal that you can talk about your emotions. Normally, when you write a grant, nobody wants to know about your emotion. But during the conclusion, this is when you can bring the point home. This is why I do what I do. For example, that mother that's doing teen pregnancy, she's going to say, I do what I did because I was I was pregnant as a teen. And these are the ramifications that I want no other young person to experience. So this is when you can talk about that personal experience as to why you're doing what you're doing. Of course, you have to show how you're going to get that information out, dissemination. For example, newsletters, your website, pamphlets about your organization, press release. It's important that I note at this particular one that whatever material you do use to get that information out, make sure you recognize the funders. For example, donated by or funded by. And all of your materials that you're going to get out there, be it your website, your pamphlets, your press release, etc. And then the appendix. This is where you put down information that they're going to need about your organization. For example, any news articles, list of your board members and officers, any recent annual reports, organizational physical reports, past success stories, and letters of support should be part of the list of things you're going to need for your appendix. Again, I can't overemphasize that the one thing you want to do is to stay active on Facebook, on LinkedIn, because that's what funders do. They search the web to see what are you doing, more importantly, what are you doing with nothing in order to ask us for something. So, of course, when you're looking at the appearance of the grant, make sure you strengthen your proposal by following some of these contents and formats. For example, make sure you use the right bold type. Make sure you use headings. Make sure you number it if the funders have asked you to number it. Make sure you use the appropriate type style. And make sure you use the appropriate transition terms in your grant. Well, all that's done. You got the proposal ready. Now comes to evaluation. How do you prove that what you just stated, your goals and objectives and all that good stuff, how can you prove that that's actually going to be done? What is the evidence? Well, we do it in two ways. First is to do what we call a program evaluation. Program evaluation actually focus on how can you prove what you say you're doing. It's focused on the performance. It uses these measurements to show that you're actually you're doing exactly what you say you're going to do, and more importantly, how well you're doing what you say you're going to do. That's what we call a program evaluation. And we use program performance in order to get the program evaluation. We're going to talk a little bit more about program evaluation and the different types in a minute. A program instruments is what you're going to use to measure whether or not you're doing what you say you're going to do. It's all based upon what you say your goal was, and now we're going to measure whether or not you're actually doing what you say you're going to do. Now, one thing to note about performance measures may address the type or level of program activity conducted. That is, what are you doing? What are the activities? That's called a process. Or it might be the direct product or services that you plan to deliver. That's called outputs. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. And or the results of the product that you plan to bring about. What are going to be the results? That's what we call outcome. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. A program may be any activity or project or function that has a identifiable purpose or set. Now, let's talk about the different types of evaluation. The first type of evaluation is what we call a goal-based evaluation. Goal-based evaluation are evaluating the extent to which the program of meeting predetermined goals and objectives. And the way the chart that we use starts with the goal and objective, to the process and activities and outcome and evaluation. Well, a lot of times you might start with goals and objectives, but yet your activity change. Your goals and objectives might be for senior citizens, but yet when you look at your activities, it's focused on youth. In other words, make sure your goals and objectives are consistent with your activities and your outcome. Groups that have been around forever, they run into this problem when they start to look at what they originally set out to do and what they're actually doing now, because they've been around 10, 15 years. So you always have to reevaluate. Are we doing what we say we want to do? The other type of evaluation is called outcome-based. By the way, this is a goal-based evaluation. The other type of evaluation is called an outcome-based evaluation. An outcome-based evaluation looks at whether or not what you're doing for that person is really benefiting that person. That you're changing that person's behavior, you're changing that person's attitude, you learn that person's skill set, you're doing something that person didn't have that acts as a benefit. And the model that we use for an outcome-based evaluation is what's known as a logic model. And the logic model starts with what your goal is. And from what your goal is, it then go to breaking down how you plan to achieve it. A logic model is a graphic illustration of the program. It tells the what, the how you plan to do it, the who's going to do it, the why they doing it, the evidence that you plan to provide to show that it was done, the sources that a person can go to find that evidence, and finally, the time period in which the program is going to take from beginning to end. Again, that's a logic model or outcome evaluation. The third type of evaluation, and we talked about two evaluation. We talked about goal, objective. We just finished outcome. And finally, the third type of objective is what's known as a process-based evaluation. In a process-based evaluation, you show specifically how you did it. So a process evaluation talks about the how you did it and the why you did it. Process-based evaluations are geared to fully understanding how a program works and how it does what it does. It is a process. For example, it uses intervention. If we're talking about we're going to change teenage pregnancy, the process-based evaluation talks about how we're going to do it. Well, we're going to have classes 5 times a week for 6 months at 1 hour per class. And these are the things that we're going to do in class. And these are why we're going to do what we do. So as you can see, a process evaluation goes to show the steps of how you're going to do it. Now, the logic model that talks about the what you want to do. The process-based evaluation, or what people call a theory of change, talk about the process to do what you say you're going to do. All right, that was a lot of information that we've gone over so far. So when I told you it's going to be one of the most comprehensive, holistic workshops you ever attended, everybody that attend my class from around the country said the same thing. Okay, so now you got your organization, now you're ready to go for the moolah, the money. Let's talk about organizational capacity once you get started. And nothing is done overnight, by the way. You build your capacity. And you build your capacity by putting together the why, the who, the what, the how, and the how much. You want to begin to address the question, why does your organization exist? And what program, what problem do you address? Who you are. What makes your organization uniquely qualified to lead to the effect you want to bring about? What programs or activities do you plan to bring into play in order to solve the problem? How will you implement the program? Who will implement the program? And how much will it cost to solve the problem? The other thing you want to have in play is your office or organizational infrastructure, policies and procedures. For example, board policies and procedures, employees policies and procedures, conflict of interest policy and procedures, affirmative action policy and procedures, all these type of policies and procedures once you're up and you're running operationally. And then you have to talk about staffing. Who is it that is going to be part of the staff? What are their qualifications? And why do you need them? Funding sustainability, this is when you begin to talk about your strategy to make sure that you continue to receive funding. We're going to talk about that later in the next in the section that deals with funding sustainability. Then you need to talk about physical control. This is where we're talking about financial management and procedures, net management, grant management, and procedures as well. Okay, someone else is coming into class. Okay, so, and then you want to do what's known as a SWOT analogy. This talks about how strong your organization is and the fact that you plan to win. Now, keep in mind, this is your nonprofit as you advance. This is not from day one. It's a step-by-step process, but the step starts with you starting your nonprofit. So, what does that mean? Well, one of the things you want to do to build capacity for your organization is to do it or have someone put together on your behalf what's known as a 5-year strategic plan. before you begin to apply for major grants. That strategic plan is going to deal with your goal for the 5 years, strategy, objectives, tactics, operations, and methods, and budget for the organization. Basically, what pointers want to know is, what is your roadmap for the next 5 years? How do you plan to get there? How many people do you plan to serve in year 1, year 2, up to year 5? How much do you need for year 1, year 2, year 5? All that stuff you want to be able to show what the plan look like in the next 5 years. And guess what? Once that's over with, the next 5 years, you got to do another 5-year plan. So you consistently are doing a 5-year plan for your organization every 5 years. Now, how do you determine how strong your organization is and whether or not you can effectively weather to be around for a long time? Here's what your Fortune 500 corporations do. They do what's known as a SWOT analogy, which is part of a strategic planning tool to evaluate your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. Your strengths is what's good about your strengths. What's good about the organization? What do we do well? Your weakness is, what can we do to improve? Your opportunities are, what's a good opportunity? Are there grants out there? It's an opportunity to partnership. Your threats is, what are those things that could hamper us from doing what we want to do? For example, are there other groups that's doing the same thing? Is it too many groups that's doing the same thing? Another might be, a threat might be, are the board really working with you? Another threat might be, this is less funding for the programs that we're doing. So all that stuff is part of that strategic plan that it's a strategic tool. It's called a SWOT analogy, and you do this as part of your strategic planning as well. In fact, you should do this for your strategic plan. Now, you need to begin to address the key components of a strong organization. First, what are your values? What do you believe in? What's your mission? When we talk about mission, the mission deals with, why do you exist? Your vision, where are you going at? What do the world look like when you finish? And your mission talk about, how do you get there? And then from your vision, your strategies. How will you get there? What do you need to do? Who needs to be part of that team in order for it to happen? What steps need to be put into play? And then finally, what are the operational steps that we need to take to get there? In other words, what we do to get there. What are the steps we need to do to get there? What will we do? And that's going to be broken down to long-term, medium, and short-term organizational goals. The other things that you want to have as you go as a nonprofit is your business plan, organizational plan, financial management, fundraising, safety and risk management, marketing and branding, and partnerships and collaboratives. Funding. Let's go to funding now. This section begins to talk about, how do you assure that you get ongoing funding for your organization? What is your financing strategy that relates to finance and making sure your organization grows? So as you can see, this is what I call social entrepreneurship. And what is it? It's the ability to fund the future of nonprofits through a combination of earned income. Earned income is anything that's not charitable or anything that's not coming from the public sector. Earned income is those things or services that you do that you get paid for. That's what we call earned income. Earned income, charitable contributions, and let me do this all over again. because it's so important. Social entrepreneurship is the ability to fund the future of nonprofits through a combination of earned income, charitable contributions, and public sector subsidies. The earned income is used to pursue your social objective by simultaneously seeking both financial and social return on your investment. One example of an earned income is if you start your own business. For example, you have this organization, it's called the CDC of Tampa, and at one point they had a t-shirt shop that they did, and the youth ran it. They had, what else was another type of, a laundromat, and some other things they did in order to bring in money. So there's all kind of ways that you can bring in money through earned income. Having said that, let's talk about the other ways to bring in resources. One is traditional grants. You can charge a fee for service. A development fee, if you're doing affordable housing or any type of capital type of project. Consulting fee, if you get so good at what you do and other groups want to consult with you to show them how to do it. Own and operate your own business, or in other words, this is what we call really earned income. Consulting fees is also earned income as well. And then the other part of this strategy is where does the revenue go? And that goes to your program, which is output, to bring about your outcomes, to bring about your benefits. So this is what we call social entrepreneurship. Yes, the budget. Put it all together in order to get the money. And a budget is related to a particular project. Every project or program you do is going to require a different project and a different budget. Well, what is it, some takeaways related to the budget? A budget project is more than just a statement of proposed expenditures. It is an alternate way of expressing your project. I tell a lot of groups to start with the budget first and then work with your goals, your objectives, and things of that nature, because you need to know your staff and all that. So you can do it either way. But there are different parts of a budget. One part of a budget is called the direct costs. The direct costs, these costs are items in the budget as an explicit project expenditure. They can be, for example, salary, wages, consultant fees, fringe benefits, etc. Indirect costs, which is the second type of cost, is known as overhead, for example, or administrative costs. And that could include anything from payroll and accounting, non-bar uses, equipment, general project management. All these could be administrative costs. Then you have cost sharing, and then in-kind. Another word for in-kind is called pro bono. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. And